탄소 부담금 또는 탄소세는 이제 기본 소득을 위해서 하자는 게 아니고 기본 소득을 위해서가 아니고 탄소 부담금을 현실화하기 위한 장치로 이거는 일부를 국민들에게 물가 상승 보존용 이런 식으로 지급하는 게 맞을 거다 그 말씀으로 좀 이해해 주시면 좋겠습니다.
Well, a lot of these products with very high green premiums, you have a how do you get started problem. You know, who's going to buy aviation fuel that's twice as expensive? Well, the answer is that, you know, rich country governments with carbon taxes and rich companies with their social commitments can bootstrap those markets.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Panelists, let me just go right down the line real fast. What % of our atmosphere is CO2? Take your best guess. You don't have to be accurate. All down the line.
Repeat that question.
What % of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Wild guess, it's okay.
I'll buy 5%.
5?
I'll just follow you then.
We'll go 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5? How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Dreyer.
7.
7. Did you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7,
This Price is Right.
8. I'm going to
Okay.
get the high end.
All right. Well, the answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not a half of a percent. It's 0.04%, and it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying off.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people will say, well, you know, Canada, for example, puts out so little greenhouse gas emissions that we shouldn't actually try to reduce it because China is double the United States. Well, the trouble is people argue that, well, yes, but we have to set an example to the world and we have to be good citizens and all that sort of thing. So they're using these arguments quite often that China's doubled the emissions of the U.S., et cetera. But the real underlying thing is that there is no climate crisis. You know, I was originally an aerospace engineer, and I would give speeches and I wrote articles. I wrote one in the Ottawa Citizen about comparative planetology, how studying the planets helps us understand the Earth better. And I used the example of the runaway greenhouse effect on Venus. I said, this could happen on the Earth if we don't reduce carbon dioxide. Well, a local professor at Carleton University, professor of geology, he liked my article so much he used it in his course on climate change. But he said to the students, but that part about Venus is wrong. What happened on Venus cannot physically happen on the Earth, and he explained why. Now, I thought, who is this climate change denier? Well, he invited me into his lab, and he showed me the geologic history that he and others are finding, and they found no consistent correlation between carbon dioxide and Earth's temperature. At times, CO2 was 1,300% of today, and we were stuck in very cold conditions. So it was all over the board. So I started wondering, well, maybe he's right. He exposed me to a lot of people who actually showed me that there are thousands of scientists. And here's a book actually that illustrates that. It's called Change Reconsidered, and this is on climatechangereconsidered.org. There are thousands of references here which talk about the fact that there is no foundation to the climate scare. It's all based on models that don't work.
97% of 33%. That's the stat the entire climate crisis narrative is being built on. Now, let's look at what's actually happening. Between 2021 and 2023, Antarctica gained over 100 billion tons of ice every year. NASA confirms Earth has become 5% greener since the early 2000s. That's like adding a second Amazon rainforest in leaf coverage. Meanwhile, in 2024, global CO2 emissions hit all-time highs. Nearly 38 billion tons released into the atmosphere. So, record emissions, yet more ice and more greenery. Now, here's a stat that they all lean on. 97% of scientists agree that humans are causing climate change. Here's what that actually means. It comes from a 2013 study that reviewed 11,944 peer-reviewed climate papers. Only 33% of those papers even took a position on whether humans are to blame. Of that one-third, 97% said yes, humans are contributing. So what they should be saying is 97% of one-third of the papers even took a position agreed, which means only about 32% of all papers actually supported the data and the idea. The other 67% said nothing either way. That's like quoting Anchorman. 60% of the time, it works every time. That was Brian Fantana. Ron Burgundy's response was, that doesn't make sense.
Ooh, it's a formidable scent. It stings the nostrils. In a good way.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to be honest with you. That smells like pure gasoline.
They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
Well,
And he's exactly right. And yet that's a stat being used to justify billions in spending, sweeping policy changes, and global pressure to act now. We're being told human-made climate change is the crisis, but the more you look at the data, the less it adds up. Earth's climate has moved in cycles, long before humans and long after us. And if the ice were disappearing and the planet were browning, you'd never stop hearing about it. But because the facts don't fit the narrative, you hear crickets. It's not denial, it's common sense. And it's about time we start asking the right questions. What's your thought?
The Heartland Institute first started to address global warming back in 1993. And back in 1993, we identified that as the mother of all environmental scare tactics. The environmentalists, the left actually, not environmentalists, groups on the left, understood that if you can control energy, you can control human beings. And that's what it was all about. This was a search for a scientific justification for a political agenda that was set well back in the 1960s and the 1970s. Of course, it goes back to the 1930s, and it goes back probably to the dawn of human civilization. But the whole idea is control energy. And if, in fact, the combustion of fossil fuels is having a dangerous impact on climate, you have a recipe for controlling all use of fossil fuels. That's 80–90% of all the energy. If you can control that and shut it down, you can shut down the engines of the world. And that is no less than what the environmental movement wants to do and has been trying to do now, going on 30 years on the global warming debate.
오늘 저는 21대 국회 최초로 기본소득 탄소세법 발의를 시작합니다. 기본소득 탄소세법은 온실가스 배출량에 탄소세를 부과하고 그 세입을 온 국민에게 탄소세 배당으로 균등 분배하는 것입니다. 2050년 탄소 중립 달성을 위해 기본소득 탄소세를 조속히 도입해야 합니다. 탄소세 세수 전액을 탄소 배당으로 균등 분배함으로써 저소득층을 포함한 대다수 국민들은 실질 소득이 늘어납니다. 조세 저항이 없어 국가 온실가스 감축 목표에 따라 탄소세율을 지속적으로 높일 수 있습니다. 이번에 발표하는 기본소득 탄소세법은 우리나라 온실가스 총 배출량 약 7억 2천만 톤에 온실가스 1톤당 8만 원을 과세하면 약 58조 원의 세수가 확보됩니다. 이를 전 국민에게 탄소세 배당으로 지급하면 매월 10만 원 정도가 됩니다.
병신, 지랄, 시발년, 개카턴 여자, 옌병. 감사합니다.